We're laying a foundation for your bank accounts once you get paid in that sales process so that you don't emotionally react because you have a cushion. Hello and welcome to the Moms Makin Dough podcast. I'm your host, Kendra Hewitt, and today is episode 30. So a huge milestone in my podcasting, and then also a huge milestone in my personal life just happened this weekend. So I have a little extra pep in my step, I feel like, because my husband and I just purchased a lake home in the state of Maine. We hail from Massachusetts. We're in north of Boston. And I'm so excited because it has been a long-term dream of mine since I've probably been, I'm going to guess, about 10 years old to have a lake home. And we got serious about it just after COVID, ironically, and when the market totally appreciated that it was really, really hard. But one of the things I wanted to stop and just recognize and celebrate beyond episode 30 is that we actually did the closing in our physical wellness center with a friend of ours. It was just amazing. And I'm going to have her on our podcast eventually because it was just so awesome to do business with supportive people that you also happen to be friends with. And it was such a blessing. We had an absolutely amazing weekend moving in. The weather was amazing. Everything about it was perfect. And it just was such I thought, a symbolic closing, because the closing being in our office, just remembering that work we put into that practice is what helped us get to this point where we could actually afford it and move into the lake house. So it was just so exciting. So this week is the fifth part of my series, my summer school series. I'm getting so much awesome feedback, and this one is very, I feel like, appropriate for the celebration of energy I'm feeling, because this week is about getting paid and making profit a priority. And if I had one episode that I like to repeat every so often, it's the episode that was the hardest lesson for me to learn, which was paying myself first in my business. And I find that this is a huge, huge challenge for many women entrepreneurs, especially when you're a working mom and you have all of these different hats you're wearing, right? Business owner being one of them. So this week is about, it's going to be in two parts. It's going to be about turning curious buyers. So last week we covered persuasive promotion and how to really grab and connect with your ideal customer, and then setting the stage, or the table, I like to say, for this week, which is making these buyers hungry where they're already pretty much pre-sold. They're ready to buy, and now streamlining the actual sales process. So if last week is about marketing and promotion, this is about streamlining and what I love to call and refer to as collecting cash, which who doesn't want to collect cash? I mean, come on. And when I say cash, I use that word interchangeably. Yes, that doesn't mean cold hard cash all the time. It means any form of payment. So however you get paid, whether it's credit cards, Bitcoin, and or cash. Old school, I guess we should say. But cash is still right now a currency. So this week is about turning those curious buyers that you started to connect with last week into confident clients. It's about building a simple sales process, because here's my number one rule on sales is just the reminder that a confused buyer will never buy because you give them decision fatigue. So we're wanting to look at our sales process on the actual process of the checkout in this episode in part one. And then in part two, I'm going to tell you how to set up your bank accounts so you can run them like a boss. Because this was something that, like I said, I did not know until probably, I would say, I did not really get curious till about 10 years into our actual physical wellness center. I kind of flew by the seat of my pants. I was always pretty good with money and moving stuff around, figuring out how I would pay with for stuff. But man, that gets really tiring, really old, and actually really stressful at times. So I started looking for ways that I could have more peace of mind in our professional finances and our business finances, even before I started looking at our personal. And I just want to say a note here too that this process that I'm going to go over today is you're going to do it in steps. There's not many people I have found that can do all of this at once and really nail it. It is an evolution, just like your money mindset's an evolution, just like you're growing your business is an evolution, and just like getting savvy with how you run not only your professional finances, but your personal ones is always a work in progress for myself included. And that's why I'm so passionate about this because a lot of times when I start, what I found, even from doing the podcast, is that I'm starting to get a lot of information from other people on like tips and tricks that they use. And I feel like I'm becoming like this kind of think tank and I absolutely freaking love it. So, I'm going to share the process that I personally use and the one that I teach to all my clients in this week's episode. And then my goal is to get you engaged where you start to give me some feedback and like add to that think tank. What are some things that have worked for you when it comes to paying yourself first? And we're going to talk a lot about that today because it is, like I said, the number one challenge I see for most women entrepreneurs. And other than that is cash flow issues. So this episode is going to handle both of those things. And I'm going to even throw in some stats that I looked up because it's just like always a good reminder, I think, to look at stats and know that you are in the higher percentage of success rather than the people that are not listening to this because they just didn't have the chutzpah or the diligence or the persistence to actually stick with running and owning a business because it is not for everyone, right? Like I always say, entrepreneurship is not for sissies. I love to say that. So we're going to talk about from that first payment, whether you are getting your first cash collected and or you have had thousands or hundreds of thousands of sales. We're going to talk about how do you set up your business accounts, your business bank accounts from the first payment from, from it to your business to future growth. Like how do you use it to scale? How do you scale smart with your actual money? And so let's talk about how we get you paid first and profitable second without losing your mind or your sanity in the process. So I always like to say too, getting profitable is not a personality trait. Like I think there's a lot of people that get a little bit confused here with mindset and personality traits that like, hey, this person's just good with money, so that's why they become profitable. Reality is the average business owner has very, very little financial um, awareness at the beginning and or education unless they worked in that specific sector. And I like to say that getting profitable, it's a mindset and it also has to be backed up by a plan to implement it. And the more consistently and more automatic the plan, the better your results will be. I was just recently listening to a podcast. I just started listening to him. It was it's a really great podcast and I'm sure a lot of my listeners would be interested. I don't know the guy's last name. He's an English guy, and I believe he's English. And it's called Diary of a CEO. And I think it's Stephen Bartlett, possibly. He's a really, really great interviewer. And I listened to a episode with that my husband recommended to me with Kevin O'Leary. And Kevin O'Leary is one of the original Shark Tank guys. I did not know much about him beyond Shark Tank, other than he was a extremely astute investor and venture capitalist. So, but he talked a lot. He had some really hard facts that he knew that he was going to get really roasted on, especially when it came to marriage and money. But one of the things that he shared on this was that Stephen Bartlett, when he was interviewing, he shared that one of the best investments he's ever made. I think they asked each other, what was the best investment you've ever made? And Stephen Bartlett was sharing about how the best investment he ever made was he actually hired his brother to run all of his money once he started becoming profitable, because his brother was way better at it than he was. But he said, and then they asked him what was the best investment, though, like physical investment that you ever made. And he said that when he hired his brother, that he had one investment account that he had put his money in, and he forgot to tell his brother about it. And because he was removed from managing the money, he could not have emotional reactivity when it came to actually managing his money. So this one account, investment account that he had put money into, he had just let it ride because he totally forgot it existed. And he talked about how, because he did not play with that amount, he didn't get scared and then take his money out. He didn't put it back in, which is where a lot of a lot of your profits can get um, dwindled, I would say, even in an investment account, is like by like fees, like miscellaneous fees, and taking it in and taking out, getting taxed on it when you take it out. So he talked about how he had just let this account ride, and it has become one of the best investments he holds to this day. And now his brother manages it because he, like I said, is taken out of the equation, where he doesn't have any emotional response that would make him act out of his character. Or emotionally, it would make him react, and he would out of fear when it comes to his money. And I thought about on this episode, that is exactly what I'm hoping to do, is that we're laying a foundation for your bank accounts once you get paid in that sales process, so that you don't emotionally react, because you have a cushion. And that's what our goal is today. So, first off, I just wanted to lead with a couple of like updated stats, because I did look some of them up after I've not looking at them for a long time. And I wanted to see if some of the numbers changed. And these are from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. And the most recent statistic I could find is that 20%, the current rate is 20% of small businesses fail in their first year, and 50% fail within 5 years. So if you have made it past year one of your business, cheers to you, woman, because you didn't just survive, you actually made it past that increment of that 20%. So you are in the 20% plus club, which is awesome. Let's set up systems that now help you sell, scale, and help you stay in business for the long term. So you make that next mile marker, which is that 5 year mark for most businesses. Then I start to see that now these are not statistics; these are my personal opinion. What I start to see, kind of my sweet spot with my coaching clients, has become is that once you get to that $500,000 mark, and that 500,000 to from six from $500,000 mark to seven figures is by far, I believe, probably the hardest and most frequently requested to scale to. So there's many people that once you've made that 5 year mark, a lot of people make it to that six-figure mark, or else you probably wouldn't stay in it. But it is really difficult to make it from that 6 to 7 figure mark for a lot of people, because you have to have a very different skill sets and start putting systems in place to do so. So, we're going to talk about the number one system that you need in your business, regardless of if you are on day one or day 1001. And that is how to go from these curious buyers that you persuasively promoted that are in your funnel, and get them to actually make a payment and convert to a sale. Um, and I always like to say here, they're already hungry because you've already warmed them up and shown them the menu. But you're still you don't want to let them guess what's on the menu. You just want to teach them how to order from you. Right. So step number one on the sales process, and part one of this is going to be, you are already have connected with them. If you listen to last week's episode, like I said, by poking the pain and painting the possibility. And now it's time to collect cash. So we need to make it as simple as possible, seamless as possible, is what I was going to say. Um, which means coming back to the premise that clarity is queen. You need to be crystal clear on what they're buying, what it costs, and what happens to have them complete the sale. The simpler, the better. And I always think about this example here is that one of my girlfriends is very, very versed in TikTok marketing. I personally do not have TikTok. It's for a reason because like I will get lost on it. But she has been telling me about some of the stuff she's doing with some of the brands she's working with. And it's been so amazing to listen to because she explained to me about how TikTok is different than like Instagram and Amazon. I think they're starting to catch up now, but TikTok has their own like merchant platform. So there's no third party involved, right? So like for example, like right now if I bought something on Instagram, I could buy it direct from a company or I could also buy it like through Amazon and then it takes me out of Instagram and puts me in wherever the cart is for something. Well, in TikTok it's very different. TikTok, and this is where it's very dangerous, I think, for people that want to really manage their money and not get into impulse buying purchases, if that's a tendency like it is for me, um, is that TikTok, it's a one click purchase, right? So I love this example here of like looking at your funnel, like how you're actually, once they're in your funnel, once a lead is here to buy, what is your actual process? How many steps is it? And is it easy to get lost in it? So, for example, like if it's on your website and it's like click here and then it brings you to this page and then it brings you to this page and then it brings you to this page and then you finally enter your information to buy. In today's day and age, that's too many steps. So, looking at first and foremost on your sales funnel, how many steps does my sales process have? And trying to get it down to as few of them as possible. So thinking Instagram, where it's multiple steps, even though it's very effective, but nowhere near as effective as TikTok, which is, like I said, becoming a problem for a lot of people where they can impulse buy and spend money with being connected to their credit card and have it the next day. It's crazy. We've never had this in front of us. I like to equate this as like this is the equivalent of like when credit cards for kids in college came out, right? Where it's like there was no consequences. They just got a credit card. They had, a $5,000 limit or whatever. And they didn't understand because they didn't have the habit that they needed to actually like be wary about what they were spending. They couldn't spend that $5,000. They maybe could spend, whatever they could afford to pay off at the end of the month. So just really thinking about looking, step number one in making your sales process simple is going to be like, how many steps does my actual sales process take? Because this is eliminating friction. This is the fewer steps you have, the more sales you will have because it's making it easy. It's cutting down on decision fatigue of the buyer or eliminating confusion for your future customer. Now there are so many streamlined checkouts. So we have Stripe, Honeybook, PayPal, um, whatever you start to use. There are so many websites that integrate now with all these different providers. Clearly stated return and refund policy is going to be your next step, right? So if clarity is queen on the actual checkout process, this is also where clarity is also king because this is a way where you have, I like to say, this used to be a huge emphasis in the sales process of like having a money back guarantee or whatever. Now, I don't think that is important as having lots of reviews and or people that are supporting that are already sharing their experience with whatever you are having them purchase at that point. So I think that on the refund part of it is like I always say, have a clearly stated return policy and support it with lots of reviews to kind of couch that um right before they buy. You want to put that kind of like you want to give them that extra dopamine hit of that this product's going to really change your life or this service is the provider that they need to go with, meaning you. And finally, what is the best way to really look and assess your current sales funnel is to remind them of the transformation. So again, like I said, reviews are other people reviewing your product. And then when we come to this next part, I call this pre-framing results. So remind them right before they click enter my card information or buy now, in a perfect world, remind them of the transformation, not just the transaction. Because I like to say this is like the positivity sandwich on the sales process is that if you create clarity with and eliminate steps, that fewer steps equal more sales. And then if you put your return policy couched with reviews, we have what I call the positivity sandwich here. And the other sandwich part in terms of the piece of bread on the top is going to be pre-framing their results. So reminding them the transformation they're going to have, not just that they're doing a transaction. So you leave them in a excited mindset rather than a possible creating doubt. And I want you to also have this is also a great place where I always say whether you're on a call or you want to guide the conversation. I'm curious to I'm committed. So this is a great part to put in like frequently asked questions that you had on calls before if you do calls in sales calls. And it also is a great place to put it in writing where you put FAQs and handle common objections that might have made them scan past that first buy button, but they're still reading and taking in information. And then the final step on sales process and just looking at your sales process is going to be what I call follow up like a friend, not a stalker. Because how annoying is it? Like I said, I just went through a mortgage with the lake house. And I'm not kidding you. As soon as they pulled my credit for the mortgage, I probably had 50 something different companies calling me about equity in my current home. Um, and just like wanting to sell me a better mortgage rate. It's just like it was nonstop. And I literally just like, I felt like I was getting absolutely stalked. And I did not answer or respond to any of them other than stop texting me or stop calling me. So you want to use this is a great place to use automation as you're scaling your business instead of like cold reminders that are very canned. I guess not cold, canned reminders. And I like to have look at this part of my sales process too is that like people that abandon carts. This just happened to me today. I was buying a mattress for the lake house. And I while I was in lunch, I was putting some options. I put a couple of things in my cart. I'm not kidding you. I came up here to record and I saw a pop up that my cart was, ready to go. Where am I? so so just reminding yourself always that when it comes to the sales process, that this is a couple of the things that you really want to look at um, when it comes to reviewing your current sales process that you have currently in your business and or setting up a new one. And then I always really love to say, what do you do after you've collect cash? Like this is a conversation I probably have every, couple days with prospective clients, friends that own businesses, family that owns businesses, just about like how do you it's something that I just feel gets skipped too often. And we're going to transition to part 2 of this episode in making profit a priority. And that starts with getting you paid. Yes, you, not everyone else before you. And then I looked up some stats on this because I actually didn't have current stats that I was quoting. So I wanted to make sure they were current. Here's stat number 1 I came up with. Nearly 30% of business owners don't pay themselves at all in their first year. That's almost 1 in 3 of us building businesses, but still living paycheck to paycheck. Not because we're not making money, but because we don't prioritize profit or have a system to keep that money. And I feel like there's that saying that says it's not what you make, it's what you keep, which I believe that. But I also think there's other elements or other parts of that sentence that often get left out, which we're going to cover today. Stat number 2 is the average small business owner pays themselves around 69,000 a year. So if you are supporting a family, if you are paying for childcare, if you are trying to get out of debt, $69,000, I don't know about where you live, but in where I live, north of Boston, sure as hell does not go very far. A lot of people just saying, we're working moms, right? So we need childcare. When it comes to childcare, I know people that are paying more in childcare than their actual mortgage. And that's especially hard to swallow when you are working 50 to 60-hour weeks or more as an entrepreneur.